Are you interested in filing a restraining order in Washington State? Do you just want to know how it works? Well, if so, this is the video for you. In this video, I'm going to cover three things. What are the three most common types of restraining orders you can seek so you have a better chance of choosing the right one, because that matters? Number two, what's the general process for obtaining a restraining order? How does it physically work? What do you need to do? And finally, number three, what is it the court looks at in deciding whether or not they're going to grant your restraining order? So my name is Lance Fryrear, and I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. We've been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington State for more than 20 years, and we also obtain and defend restraining orders. So I'm putting out these videos as education to the public. There's not much out there. So if you find this video useful, please like and please subscribe, as it helps me get the information to more people. So now I'm just going to jump into it. Number one, what are the three most common types of restraining orders that you might seek? Well, there's an anti-harassment order, a domestic violence protection order, and you also see a stalking order. Those are the most common types. There's 4 or 5 others, but I'm going to go with those 3. So anti-harassment is the most common type of order you might see with neighbors, a neighbor dispute. Or co-workers, something like that. Think about an anti-harassment restraining order as you've given the person that you seek to restrain, that's the respondent, clear notice that you don't wish any more contact, and they continue to contact you. The contact has to cause some emotional distress. It has to be harassing. There has to be a course of conduct, which means usually more than one contact. And there's an entire statute on what's required. And I'm going to link to the statute in the description because this is just generally going over it. So anti-harassment, think about it as people are talking to you when you've told them not to. They're contacting you. They're threatening you, stuff like that. The second most common type of order is the domestic violence protection order. Domestic violence protection order is a little more easy to understand. It's sort of like what it sounds. Hey, I'm a victim of domestic violence, and therefore I need an order of protection. And so usually that's between family or household members, someone that you've dated or you've been married to, or a relative, a roommate, not a stranger, because you have to have a family or household relationship. And again, I'll link to that in the description. And finally, another one we see is a stalking protection order. That's quite a bit more complicated. Think about someone following you and placing you in fear. They're making threats. There's other ways to fit a case into a stalking order, but that one is a bit more complicated. And again, I'll link to it in the description. So moving on to the second point, what's the physical process? How do you get a restraining order? Well, the first thing you have to think about is, where do I file the restraining order? Which court? Okay, so usually most people want to file the court in the jurisdiction where they live. And typically it's going to be a district court, not a superior court. For a domestic violence protection order with children or with throwing someone out of a home, you might be able to directly file into superior court, but it's safest to go to the district court first. When I say go to the district court, assuming courts are open, you can walk in and ask for a packet, a restraining order packet, and they might ask you, well, which type of order do you want? Or you could also nowadays get some of the restraining order packets online. When I say a packet, basically there's a standardized forms that you're going to fill out with your name as the petitioner, the person that you want to restrain as the respondent, and then you're going to answer some questions. What type of restraints do you seek? And there's boxes to check. Well, don't contact me, don't come to my home or residence. You can include children on some of them. And finally, the most important part of this, there's going to be an area in the petition that you're filling out where you have to write what it is that's been happening that justifies the court issuing an order against the respondent, the person you don't want contacting you. And so you have to fill that all out, and then you need to sign it, and then you need to turn it into the court. In some cases, you're going to need to pay a fee, and in some cases you're not, and that's going to vary based upon the type of the order, and it should be in the instructions. So you get the form from the court or online, you fill it out, you sign it, you turn it in, and then there's going to be a court date, usually for most courts the next day, where you appear ex parte. And that's a fancy legal word, but it means one-sided. In other words, you get to appear And the court is going to look at your petition and determine whether or not if what you wrote in your petition satisfies the statutory requirements and those statutes that I've linked to in the description to grant you emergency temporary relief. And if the court agrees that what you've written satisfies the statute, then they're going to issue a temporary restraining order, usually good for 2 weeks. And the order is going to have on the first page a date where you have to come back to court. Because for that temporary order to be of any effect for the 2 weeks, it has to be served on the respondent. And you cannot serve it yourself. This is important. Sometimes the court will order the police to serve it. And sometimes the court will say you have to figure out how to serve it on your own. That doesn't mean you. That means another person 18 years old or older who's not named in the petition as the petitioner or the respondent, of course. And once it gets served, you have to fill out a return of service paper and file that with the court prior to your return date, which is 2 weeks later. So it's a bit complicated, but file the request, go in front of the court. If the temporary order is granted, it has to be served. So that's the process of how you get the temporary restraining order. Then you need to return for the permanent restraining order hearing, and that's moving on to step 3. So thanks for sticking around this long because it is a complicated process. Step 3 is you need to go back to court on the permanent restraining order day because the respondent has to have their chance to answer to what you wrote in the petition. And if you don't return to the new date, then your temporary order is going to get dismissed and there'll be no more effect. If you do return, then the respondent is going to have a chance to answer to the petition. Oftentimes the respondent will file their own response in writing, which they are supposed to serve you with. And then the court will talk to you as the petitioner and the respondent and decide what to do. And so what's the court looking for? Well, the court is looking for who it believes by a preponderance of the evidence. That means more likely than not. Who do they believe? Do they believe that the petitioner where the harassment or domestic violence happened and it's been proven because the burden is on the petitioner? Or do they believe the respondent or at least believe the petitioner hasn't met his or her burden? And so what the court's looking for is credibility. The court's looking for a true emotional story. The court's looking for evidence. If you have text messages, they need to be included in the petition. If you have a phone message, you need to reference it and quote it in the petition and have it available if the court wants to hear it. In some cases, in some courts, you might be able to upload it. But the court is trying to determine who's sort of telling the truth. And so it's important to remain calm. It's important to show respect, but it's important to really make sure your story is told. So those are the tips of how you get a restraining order here in Washington State. So if you found this video helpful, please like and please subscribe to the channel. It helps get that information out. And more importantly, if you have a restraining order issue, if you're trying to obtain an order, or you're trying to defend an order, we do take a fair number of those cases. So you can always reach out to us. Just give us a call. Again, my name's Lance Fryrear. We've been defending people charged with crimes and handling these types of orders for more than 20 years. We'll typically talk to you about what you're trying to accomplish, see if it makes sense for us to help. If so, we'll set you an appointment and we'll be there for you. Thank you.